Hello, everybody. I'm Chris. Thanks very much for having me. Pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to work in this world of electrification and mobility and energy. And as a lawyer, I've definitely found that it's made me slightly more palatable at dinner parties and social scenarios. And I hear a lot of people's opinions when I mention electrification. And just as a sounding board for, the state of play, it's what everybody wants to talk about. And it's a pleasure to be in a sector that is so critical to everybody and so fast moving. Proud owner of 2 EVs. One is a beneficiary of a lot of deep discounting at the end of last year, so I have the ZEV mandate to thank for that. But one example I saw the other day of the penetration of the market, particularly on the used side, is that when my insurers have kindly let me know that Nissan Leafs are now quite popular among the boy racers section and, of the Southwest, and that's why my rating on the insurance has gone up. So, swings and roundabouts. I hope they don't lower the suspension too much and go anywhere near a speed bump. It feels like, we're at a critical juncture. As Mike and the report said, we're all in it together. Vicky Reed said on the video that it is a team game. So without further ado, let's bring on our team for today's panel. Please give them a warm welcome.
Electrification offers us a prime opportunity to be at the forefront of UK decarbonisation, no longer just being part of the problem, but becoming a central part of the solution. We have the brands and the production here, we all just need the certainty to invest longer term.
I'm more excited than I have been over the last 15 years of working in this industry. 3 simple reasons. First of all, demand is starting to grow in the UK. Secondly, it's clear. Other markets have shown the path. With consistent long-term planning, you can move to 100% zero emissions vehicles from new car sales. But thirdly, just think of the generations ahead of us.
As we make the transition as an automotive industry and all the associated infrastructure, we've had to rethink lots of our business, from vehicle design to rollout of charging infrastructure, and to do that we've had to and continue the need to innovate, which I think is going to generate lots of opportunities. The challenge at the moment is that customer demand isn't keeping pace with those ambitious VETS targets. So to make it work, we need government support for customer incentives and targeted policies that help businesses and customers make the switch.
As a company, we've invested heavily developing products to make the switch to electric more appealing, and many customers already enjoy the benefits. But if we're to appeal on a broad scale, then all the surrounding conditions have got to be right, including access to purchase incentives for retail customers, charging infrastructure, and of course cost.
The transition to electric vehicles in the UK is at a critical point right now. Consumer demand for EVs is not matching government ambitions, and targets only get progressively more challenging. Now is the time for action from government, to stand strongly alongside our years of investment and innovation.
This is an absolutely critical time on the journey to electric mobility. What's really needed to speed things up is a focus on consumer confidence, education, and measures to stimulate the demand side.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all very much. I think we'll get straight into it there. First of all, can I come to you and just ask about your general comment on the state of the market as you see it, particularly from a production point and with a view of the mandate and what you'd like to see develop. But perhaps you can just comment, maybe just on what Mike said this morning. How does the market feel to you? And maybe we'll go right to left, just for fun. David.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chris. I kind of feel a bit superfluous here now after Mike's opening speech. I think he really did a great job of covering the broad challenges we've got within the industry as we go through this transition. I think what I sense is this sense that there's some resistance from manufacturers to make the transition. And I think what I'd be here to say is that very much couldn't be further from the truth. I think I can talk on behalf of BMW Group. We launched an electric Mini back in 2008. We launched the i3, our first electric car, 2013. Looking at Auto Trader, there's still over 400 for sale today, 10 years later. So we've made massive investments. Our current product range is amongst the most extensive And our next generation of products, what we call the Neue Klasse, will move us on another level again. So we've made huge, huge investments in making the transition. And it's not just product. You know, from a product perspective, yes, but also I've got to think about our retail partners. You know, if we think about our dealer partners, the investments that they've made in training, investments they've made in infrastructure, the charging requirements that they've got to make sure they keep step, our marketing costs. So what I would say overall is that we've put a huge amount into driving the transition. And I think what we feel now is that the penalties only now lie with us, despite trying to control everything that's within our control. Retail demand, as we hear, really isn't in line with the ZEV mandates. And that, for us as a business, last year, we were able to achieve our targets. This year, we're hopeful. But even for us, in the position we're in, it's incredibly difficult. And I think we're going to be seeing some real challenges towards the end of this year and absolutely for sure next year if the landscape doesn't change.
David, thank you. Paul, coming to you, I guess you might share some of the view. Do you feel the burden's been sort of disproportionately on the manufacturing side?
Absolutely. I mean, my first point would say, you know, the demand for EVs is growing. It was up 20% last year. It's up 40% in the first quarter. We'll wait to see where March finishes pre-VED increases. You know, that's off the back of billions of investment by the manufacturers in developing now 130 EVs available for sale today. We're then all investing millions in marketing and communicating that all of these EVs and their benefits exist. Alongside that, we're investing thousands per unit in incentives to convince customers to make the switch from ICE to EV. So we're investing at every point. At Kia, we're pretty good at EVs. EV3 is just won UK Car of the Year. EV6 was a former European Car of the Year. EV9 was World Car of the Year and UK Car of the Year last year. We should be flying through our mandate targets. We scraped there last year by using the flexibilities available to us based on the non-ZEV CO2 reduction versus the 21 benchmark, and we'll need those again this year. And those flexibilities are declining right now, and at the end of next year, go away completely. I'll give you one example of the scale of our investment in producing products. We actually sold our first EV in 2014. Wasn't the best car we've ever produced, but the Soul EV was our first EV sold in 2014. It was priced at £33,000. It had a range of 132 miles. Today, we sell EV3, which is a very similarly sized car to Soul EV. It's priced from £33,000, exactly the same as Soul EV, and the range is up to 375 miles. That's the result of our R&D investment. Right now, we need help from government in closing the gap between where demand is today and the ambitious mandate targets that I hear are not changing.
Indeed. Ian, I actually said right to left, but I'm going to skip you out and come back to you if that's okay.
Of course.
Lisa, if I could come to you as well. I mean, just reflecting more on that, and I think with Mike's framing of this is the fact that the landscape has changed since the mandate was introduced. Would you agree with that? Do you feel there's been a sort of change from where we may have thought things were going to be a few years back?
I think this might be the most uninteresting panel that you'll ever chair because we're all in violent agreement, Chris.
Yeah.
I think that, so certainly looking back 2-3 years ago, there was growing demand for electric vehicles and great positivity and optimism. And I think we saw a lot of early adopters coming into the market and a real shortage of supply. What we've got is a real broad range of electric vehicles available. As colleagues have talked about, that manufacturers have invested, and we've definitely not seen demand grow at the rate that had been projected, and certainly not at the level that would help us meet our VETS target. And I think there are differences in the industry. When you look at the subsections of the industry, they're growing at different rates because of different reasons. So we talked about, Jenny, you talked about salary sacrifice. It's a real positive benefit for employees, and the uptake is, in February, was well over 50%. Now, some of that might be because of pushing to beat some of the tax changes, but it's there. At retail, it's still not hitting 15%, and the retail on cars is still by far the biggest bit of the industry. In my business, I'm interested in cars, but I'm also interested in commercial vehicles. We sell over a third of the commercial vehicle industry for products, and certainly in our fleet business, there are certain fleets who have made environmental commitments and they're in the forefront of switching to electrified product. But we have a lot of businesses, in particular our sole traders, don't want to make the switch, and that's even on the back of having plug-in van grants available. So it's a really, really challenging market, and I think the trajectory and sentiment has very much changed from what it was a number of years ago.
Brilliant, thank you, Lisa. Gareth, coming to you, sort of same reflection, I guess, as just anything to amplify or add to the previous panelists' comments.
Yeah, I think two things to build on for me. One is around collaboration. You know, if there's a feeling of manufacturers not wanting to collaborate, that's absolutely not the case. You know, we've even been collaborating with BMW back in the 2010s, putting in charging infrastructure together with our partners at Renault as well for not just the UK but also Europe. And when you see manufacturers willing to invest not just in the R&D of great products, trying to build demand and desire for customers, but also into other industries to try and support what customers really need, which is easy mobility solutions and easy ability to charge. You know, I think that needs to be recognised, and I think we need to continue to build on that collaboration, and events like this certainly help to do that. I think the other side for me, though, is around flexibility. Demand will go up and down, interest rates go up and down, consumer behaviours, consumer confidence goes up and down. So within all of those changes, all of those difficulties, the biggest thing we need in this industry is flexibility, and perhaps an understanding that behaviour is driven much more by carrots than sticks. And if we can put more carrots in, better products, which we're doing, better charging infrastructure, which is absolutely being put in place, that is going to drive consumer behaviour for the longer term, rather than going down the route of more sticks and more penalties, which could impact the obvious demand that we need to grow.
I don't think that is a sort of a theme we'll come back to about the fact that we're wanting more carrot, wanting perhaps fewer sticks. Ian, coming to you now, I think, picking up this point on demand and Auto Trader being a good, I guess, barometer of what people are interested in or searching for. What's your view on the state of the demand? Is there untapped latent demand there? Are there easier segments that we can move into? Tell us about what people are thinking.
Well, I think we should probably recap a little bit on what's going on in both the new and used EV space. So the new car numbers, I think the Minister did a brilliant job of recounting some of the key facts that are out there, and we're working a lot with the SMMT, Charge UK and others to make sure that we do share the facts. They are generally positive, and definitely share the point that they're also expensive and challenging to drive those facts. But if you look at today where we are, what's driving positivity in the consumer's mindset is improving affordability. We know that that's the number one barrier for many people in getting electric cars. We measured the gap between electric vehicles and their ICE equivalents, new cars, I should add. In manufacturer recommended retail price terms, like-for-like gap used to be 35% just at the beginning of 2024. Beginning of this year, that number's dropped 12 percentage points to 23. There's still 23 percentage points sort of the wrong way, but a market improvement, and that will drive increasing levels of interest. The second factor, Mike touched equally on the growing choice that's out there, 150 or so EV models to choose from, which is great. More choice means good news for consumers. But in particular, what's noticeable now is that there are growing numbers of vehicles in the more affordable categories that consumers need to find if they're able to go mass market towards the EV adoption that we need them to do. So to give you another example, 9 EVs were available under £30,000 a year ago. Now there are 29. And there's a growing number coming into the market. So all of those factors of choice and affordability are clearly good. It's costing money. Discount rate, you could see from a consumer point of view, is good news. Discounts on EVs are around 11-12% right now. That's up on the typical ICE discount we see on new vehicles around 7 to 8. So there's a push coming in the market from manufacturers, retailers to generate this demand, but it is generating interest. And we're seeing that flow through into searches on Auto Trader. So typically 2 in 10 new car leads, for example, not just a search, but translating into interest, from interest into action, are electric on the new car platform. So that's ahead of the sort of 10% retail rate that we're seeing. So that's a growing number, actually, a steadily growing number we've seen on the rise during last year. So that's a sign of probably intent flowing through, hopefully in the months ahead, to that increasing level of sales numbers that we've seen so far this year. So all of that's good. I think we talk a lot also around the regulatory challenge that the industry faces. I think there's another one that is not unbeknownst to anybody in this room, but that's an increasing competition challenge. There are an increasing number of brands coming into our market, and if you look at the state of play, the market we're talking about right now in the UK, Mike touched on 2 million cars. We'd love it to be back at 2.5 million. That's where it was pre-pandemic. We were used to 2.5 million cars. we're used to 45 or so brands competing for a share of that market. Right now, the market is 2, and by the end of this year, we'll have more than 70 brands competing for that market. So that is driving a significant amount of change and challenge within, no doubt, the boardrooms of my colleagues here on this panel. So if I just quickly pick up on the used car side of things, there's a lot of positivity there as well. Sometimes it's talked about as being an element of risk. It is. It's seen some difficult times. In 2023, there was a big price cut that hit the used car market because supply was coming through in a faster rate than demand was able to cope with. Demand slumped, just as many cars were coming back into the market from first returning leases, short cycle business getting put into the market as well, the time when many launches were happening. But demand slumped because the energy prices went shooting up, Ukraine war related, etc., and fuel prices were coming down. So that has a very strong correlation to interest in EVs that we can see on our platform. That put to one side, we saw last year the EV market for used cars rise to around 2.5% of the overall share. Demand grew by around 60%, so strong interest. EVs as a cohort turned in every 29 days. If you're a retailer selling cars, speed of turn is your #1 criteria if you're judging return on investment. So at 29 days, they turned 1 day faster than petrol, and they turned 2 days faster than diesel. So they're generally good news. The very fastest turning segment, when you look at fuel and age, was 2 to 5-year-old EVs. So they're generally good news. More retailers franchise, about 85% franchise retailers are now all selling EVs. Some brands on this platform have had EVs in their ranges earlier than others, so their networks are fully engaged in used EVs too. They'll need to do that. And increasingly, we see equally independent retailers, around 10,000 or so on our platform, and around 22,000 of those are now selling EVs. That's up around 20%. Why are they doing this? Because they're selling them quicker and they're gaining a bit more confidence. So there is positivity. The big challenge is that depreciation curve, which clearly cost a lot of money to many people in this room here. But when they're entering the market now and being seen as a more affordable option, they are working for consumers. The last thing I just add, it was touched on the ECS a minute ago. ECS also hits the used market. It's got a big dampening factor risk on the new car market. But if you look at the EV side of things on used, that would also affect a significant proportion, around 60% of used 0 to 5-year-old EVs, will be affected by that ECS supplement. That figure for ICE vehicles is only 20%. So like Mike said, it wasn't intended to capture all of these new EVs, all the used EVs, and anything that will put at risk the positivity we've seen in the used EV market, on which the new EV market also depends, is really something we should be very wary about.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. That's a very comprehensive view of where we are at the moment. And I think leading into that, David, coming back to you, I don't want to sort of dwell on negative points, but I think Mike used the term with the sort of the cost to industry last year in meeting the targets with 4.5 billion, and that's unsustainable. I mean, just very briefly, paint a picture for us of the risks of sort of continued inflexibility and what, as an industry, you may be up against.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult not to be negative when it comes to the impact that has on the industry as a whole. Yeah, I mean, it's essentially that, you know, the cost of producing electric vehicles it will come down, and it's continued to come down as technology improves. The cost of producing electric vehicles is more expensive, and the margins are not as strong as have been in the past on ICE products. And what we're then having to do in addition is to incentivize, and the incentivization of retail customers particularly is coming down to the manufacturers. So for us, the only way to incentivize retail customers is through price. That's the huge barrier. And as Ian said, you know, at a used car level, when cars hit a certain price point and they have parity with ICE product, then they will sell. Yep. So it falls upon the manufacturers and our retailer partners to make that parity from a new car perspective, and that is not sustainable. If you then add onto that the potential impact of fines of £15,000 per car, as you, I often get asked by friends of family what's going on in the industry, and I mentioned that they are blown away. They can't understand how that could possibly be, but £15,000 per car, that we miss the target that's been imposed upon us with a consumer that isn't willing to purchase. It's a challenge, and it's been just about manageable, as Paul said. The next year, the next 18 months, the next 2 years, it really becomes unsustainable.
Understood. Paul, agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a fear here. We all look at the transition to EVs very negatively because we're missing targets. and us manufacturers don't like missing targets. We've grown up, monthly sales targets must be hit. Yeah. On EVs, we're in danger of talking down the progress that we're making, very significant progress that we're making. We should be punching the air with 20% growth in EV demand last year and 40% this year so far, and we're all feeling we've got swords held above our heads with £15,000 per unit fines if we miss these targets. That is forcing us to incentivise and discount the very best technology that we've invested billions in order to get to government targets and in order to support the road to zero. It's just all a bit perverse right now. And I think there's a real risk that we all come away from these few years feeling much more negative about electrification than we should do.
I think that's a really good point, actually. And the tone of the report this morning, there's a huge positive opportunity to go beyond and generate all this sort of benefit, not just for this sector, but for adjacent sectors, the charging, supply chain, and jobs as a result. Lisa, does that resonate with you? Do you think there's... are you going to sort of go away from this next few years feeling bruised by sort of batting up against these targets? Or is there a better way of doing it?
I think, we've had a government consultation that everyone's replied to, and the SMMT have input as well. And I think we need a better plan to go forward. I think we all have, as an industry, we've backed the really ambitious VETS targets that have been written down. We've all invested in product. Our networks have invested in training. I think we need to find a way to make it a success, is kind of what I would ask. Yes, I know we're asking for incentives, but I think we've all seen that where you can get momentum in a marketplace, you can turn things around and you can make a success. And some of the clips you got at the beginning, it talks about innovation, and I think that there are benefits in moving into electrification that comes through a lot of innovation in associated industries. And I think that if we could gain momentum and stop us all thinking negatively about electrification, I think we could deliver great things in the UK. It's just that we're not there yet. We're in a downward spiral. And I think we have to turn it around and into an upward spiral. And fundamentally, my belief is that's all about generating demand, because Ian talked about the used vehicle market. New vehicle sales are underpinned by used vehicles, and that's all driven by, it's kind of like a perfect market at supply and demand. I think that if we can generate genuine customer demand for EVs, both cars and commercials, that matches the VETS targets, then I think we could have a roaring success. And I think that's what we need to lean into, and we need to encourage the government to think like that and to act quickly. I think the thing that was surprising was in the EU, they started a review at the beginning of January, and they published the output of that a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of March. So they've turned something around really, really quickly. And I think we would ask the UK government to do the same, because that's like 20 some odd countries. You associate the EU with bureaucracy. Why can't we ask the UK government to act with the same kind of speed?
Brilliant. Thank you, Lisa, very much. Gareth, coming to you. I think we're, I guess maybe I could put you on the spot and say, do you feel there is going to be some sort of, change to the mandate? Jonathan Reynolds seemed to indicate that was likely, but without sort of clear idea of what it is. And although, Ian, you mentioned that OZEV have said something different. So I guess, clarity from government and government all sort of pulling the same levers in a coordinated way would certainly be helpful, I guess.
Look, I think, first of all, it's important that sort of the positivity is brought to the forefront. I'm lucky enough to have worked for a car company that has believed in zero emissions long before there were mandates and a focus from governments of this transition that we wanted to make. And having been very involved in the launch of the Nissan Leaf, which is a leading electric affordable family car, not a boy racer car, just to come back on that.
I stand corrected. No.
You saw the people that moved to that vehicle, and the feedback was very simple, and I'm sure you guys all seem the same. People don't want to move back once they transition to electric vehicles because they see it as a positive experience and they want to move to this modern technology. But as soon as you start discounting modern technology, it doesn't create that same level of excitement or passion of people striving to move into a new vehicle. Yeah. On the other side, we need to make electric mobility as accessible as possible and absolutely more affordable than driving an ICE vehicle. which is why from our side, we're looking at what partnerships we can form to bring more electric vehicles to more people, which is why we're bringing L-segment electric vehicles, electric motorbikes, electric quadricycles to the market in the UK, not because there are incentives there, not because we're being paid to do that or being incentivized to do that through avoiding penalties, but because it's the right thing to do and because there is consumer demand there. You know, I read an article in The Economist recently, 57% of people living in cities would love to move towards a more ecological form of mobility, whether that's electric quadricycles, whether that's an electric car. But of course, charging infrastructure needs to help them do that, and it needs to be at the right price. So having that flexibility of product is much more important than looking at it from the other side in terms of penalties and in terms of regulation. And really that collaboration has got to be there, and that consistency of thought, I think, has got to be there for the long term, because we've seen other markets in Europe do this. We've seen the likes of Norway set out long-term policies that have helped customers trust in the industry, trust in the vehicles, and then the manufacturers have come from all parts of the globe to invest and put vehicles in place that customers have wanted to buy and have enjoyed transitioning to.
Brilliant. I agree with that entirely. I think moving on from where we got to, I just want to test the negativity, if you like, but I think really a lot of focus now on what we need to do. You know, what does need to happen at government level, from the industry, from adjacent sectors? What levers do we all need to pull? And I think particularly focusing on consumer confidence and therefore demand. Ian, I'm just going to come to you briefly, if I can, just to sort of set the scene. You know, what's your view from what's the main priority on this market?
Before I answer the question, I'll just indicate there are 4,000 used EV Leafs on the platform at the moment on the trader. There are 100 under £4,000 as well, so you can find one of your favourite cars quite easily. And that's really good for that affordability point we talked about, because it isn't just about affording the newer ones, but equally the used ones. There are Teslas now at £10,000 you can find beginning to get to that level. So that's great. That's going to unlock new opportunities. I think the biggest thing that we would encourage everybody to think about is, I think it was touched on, Mike mentioned joined-upness. We work in an industry, we need to work together in the industry, all of us. We at Auto Trader don't build the cars, we don't sell them, we try and help the people that do those things to do just that, consumers to find them. But the consumer out there, if you think about their perspective on things, they need certainty and confidence. I think the Minister spoke brilliantly to those two key points. That's exactly what we need. Things like the expensive car supplement will get talked about very negatively in some of the media of a certain slant, more than it should do. It will get blown out of proportion, it will get misunderstood, and it will add to the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt factor that's already in the way. What we need to do is find ways of avoiding negativity, such as those points, which clearly, you know, there's revenue requirements needed in the Treasury, we all know that. But the positive value of that income that can be gained there will be far outweighed, I believe, negatively by the impact potentially on the sales rates of these vehicles, new and used. We mentioned it's not just a new vehicle that will be taxed by this sort of change. So that's just an example of negativity which we really don't need. We do need joined-upness. We need things like comparable language of how we charge our cars, kilowatt hours, etc. We need to talk in layperson speak. We need to enable people to overcome the fear factor of maybe the charging point. I agree with Mike's message earlier. It is challenging, but the majority of people out there are able to charge at home. Now, 60-odd%, a bit more than 60-odd% of people could charge with their own solution. And if they do that, they actually have greater convenience than today fueling at a petrol station. Yes, there's the highway issue when they're doing longer distances, of which there are huge, typically done by most people. So there are people out there for whom we can be particularly positive. And I think if we focus on generating momentum, remembering that we're in a behavioural change sort of journey here, which is going to be massively complicated and multi-years, we can get more people progressively on that journey, talking more positively amongst their friends, you know, in their social context at dinner tables and so on, and hopefully generating a snowball effect which can drive positivity. The one last thing I'd just say, I think if we're talking incentives, our belief from what we've seen at Auto Trader is that when the plug-in car grant was in place, you couldn't tell whether it had an impact. Most of the EVs, to be fair, in the market at that time were relatively expensive. The EV intender and buyer we saw on our platform was a wealthier, older person than the average car buyer. When the grant was reduced, and then even when it was taken off, we didn't see a noticeable impact. Less than half of consumers, when we researched it, didn't even know it existed. So if we communicate positivity, we need to do it in a broader, bigger, louder way. But if we do put incentives in place, our belief should be that it should play to the fairer, greener agenda of this government, and target used EVs of, let's say, under £20,000 and new EVs of under £30,000. That's where the mass market should be. If I'm buying a 50,000 EV, my assumption would be, based on our data in the past, that a couple of £1,000s here or there isn't going to make a difference. To make a difference on that size of car would be colossally expensive and unrealistic to expect the government to support. But anyway, long answer, sorry, confidence and certainty is the name of the game.
Brilliant. David, I'm going to come to you and just say, what are your main priorities you would see as stimulating demand, building that confidence and getting us all sort of back to a really positive place?
Yeah, I think that word certainty has been used a lot. Mike talked about it. Certainty and simplicity, I think, really. Certainly for consumers, it's very confusing. I think everybody in this room is somewhat an expert, as far as we can be experts in this early stage of electrification. But the majority of consumers out there are not. And I think it's a very difficult landscape if you're trying to make a decision on purchasing a car at the moment with what you might be reading in the news, what you might be hearing. So some simplification of taxation, certainly some certainty. And I would also say, to Lisa's point, soon. It needs to happen soon. I think charging ease, I wouldn't talk just about infrastructure, but charging ease, the ability for you to charge wherever you want, whenever you want, more easily is going to be so crucial, so important. And things are improving. I visited one of our dealers yesterday, and I visited them. It was just by chance. I visited them in the very first Mini Electric that we launched, the latest generation Mini Electric, and I was terrified. I went to pick my boss up from Germany, and I picked him up from the airport and drove to the dealership, terrified that I was going to run out of charge. I'm wondering how I was going to charge and how it would work and how I'd get back to the office with him. And I went yesterday, and I got in my car in the morning, and I didn't even look what I had in the tank or in the battery, and just didn't even bother charging when I got there. Things have changed. Things are progressing really rapidly. But people who are not used to that are not seeing it. All they're hearing is the bad news. So I think it's so important that charging ease becomes really first, really prominent. And the other thing I'd say is openness. From a technology perspective, openness. Electrification, we are committed to 27% of BMW Group product last year were pure electric. That's really significant for us. It shows a real investment from us in the technology. But equally, plug-in hybrid can be a solution. And as it's well known, we've been working with hydrogen. Now, currently, hydrogen isn't seen as zero emission because hydrogen has an emission from the tailpipe. The emission is water. That really doesn't make any sense. So we've got to keep an openness to technology going forward that allows faster transition over the course of the next 5 to 10 years.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Paul, coming to you, same question.
Yeah, I think I would ask government for joined up, fair, equitable, long-term thinking with a fair balance of carrots and sticks, and it doesn't feel right now very fair. In 19 days' time, with this much talked about expensive car supplement, we are about to add more tax to most EVs than they're going to increase the VED on most ICE cars. That cannot be right if we're all heading towards 80% EV by 2030. I think the expensive car supplement being applied at £40,000 is perverse. I think we did some calculations. Last year, 25% of non-electric vehicles were above the £40,000 threshold and attracted the £2,500 additional taxation over years 2 to 6. 70% of EVs last year were priced above £40,000. So we're about to tax 70%, maybe slightly less this year because there are more cheaper EVs coming, with more VED for customers than if they currently own an ICE car. How that supports our road to zero, I'm not sure. Beyond that, we need incentives. We need to share the burden of costs. Getting to 22%, 28% is a challenge right now. 33% next year. Then the big challenge comes. If we haven't got momentum going into 2027, how do we get from 33% to 80% in 4 years? So we need momentum now, and that momentum has to come from government incentivisation for retail customers to make the switch now.
Paul, thank you very much.
I think if you get that momentum, you'll get to a critical point where it'll be bad news to even consider having a petrol car.
Yeah.
Because everyone will be talking about and going on this journey towards EVs.
And I think that's right.
Once you get there, the momentum will get. We need the momentum now.
It's a sort of snowball effect to build that positivity. Lisa, is that resonating with you?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you mentioned Norway, and that's kind of the best transition, the leading light across Europe for electrification. But they did that as a government and as a country through a really aligned and concerted strategy that had tax incentives, infrastructure, everything aligned to allow that to happen. And it feels like at the moment that's not the case. And as everyone said before, the burden or the penalty for not achieving it sits with manufacturers. And I think we need to just pause, reset, and get everything aligned to allow us to move forward. I think that we're in the room and we're probably familiar with electric and positive about electric, but for a lot of customers, it's a really big change for them. And it's a very big decision, and one of which that it's very easy for them to put off. And as Paul said, I think the thing that we need now is momentum. And I think if we get momentum, we will build along the trajectory. Without momentum, I don't think we're going to get there. I think it's really, really challenging. And I think that there's a lot of small things that by in and of themselves don't seem like an awful lot, but when you add them up, they are barriers. So the taxation changes send a message to customers of decisions they should make. In the commercial vehicle world, because of the implication around weights, there's cost implications for operators around licensing, around MOTs. Those don't have to be there. You know, we shouldn't have those. We should have thought that through and fixed it early on. And maybe they will get fixed now, but it's kind of late, and it should be happened, and it should be happening faster.
Agreed. So building that momentum, building that sort of positive trajectory. Gareth, I presume you're on board with that?
Yeah, I think we're all quite aligned here, but for me it's sort of technology agnostic, customer agnostic as well, right? Because customers want different forms of mobility, and at the moment we cut up different segments and we focus on them as if customers don't have a choice of all of these types of mobility. So having that long-term focus on mobility overall and how we incentivize it and focus on the carrots for customers to move across to zero emissions or sort of positive climate-focused vehicles rather than negative climate-focused vehicles, I think is really important. And at the same time, giving the freedom then to the manufacturers to actually build that picture of these vehicles are more modern, they are a better way of driving, they have more benefits other than just the impact on the environment, and we should be focusing on that side of it to customers to give them confidence to take that first step to electric mobility.
Absolutely. We've got 3 or 4 minutes left. I think rather than go to, I'm not sure if hand went up at the back. Is the panel happy to take 1 or 2 questions quickly before we wrap? Definitely the hand at the back went up first, if that's all right. I mean, maybe just keep them as brief as you can, because we're a little bit up against it on time.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Julia Anokam, Head of Sustainability for Optimus. Yeah, thank you so much for all of your insights. Really interesting to hear about some of the things we can do around commercial vehicles being electrified, things like salary sacrifice, which are things that I sort of try to do in my role. One of the questions I had was around adjacent sort of sectors, things like your supply chain. So our company, for instance, might sit in your supply chain. So one of the questions I had was, what role do you see them playing in helping sort of build that momentum and demand?
Brilliant, thank you. Can I take the second question now as well? We'll perhaps sort of pick them up together.
Okay, hi, Kat Dow from BBC Top Gear. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is I'm very happy and 10 is grab the pitchfork, how, each of you, how disappointed are you with a government response that says we are looking into this, we are looking into that?
We'll take those, right, well, I think we'll take those as an interesting pairing. And I will give my panel the choice of addressing 1, neither, or both. David.
I didn't really hear the second question, sorry.
It was a sort of leading question, Your Honour. How disappointed are you with the response that says we're looking at this, we're considering it, as opposed to we can give you a commitment on?
Well, I want to take first and foremost, it's encouraging that we're hearing that they're listening. That's the most important thing. It remains to be seen how quickly we get an action and what that action is. So I couldn't say whether I couldn't give you a 1 to 10, but what I'd say is encouraged that they're listening, but we really need some swiftness of decision now.
I think certainly a call for clarity as quickly as possible is universally shared, it seems. Paul, coming to you, either on that question and sort of government response or adjacent industry.
I would reiterate on the second question that it is very encouraging that the doors are open and we've had some good conversations with government. The fast track consultation is complete. Now we're waiting for feedback. Hopefully that will address some of our concerns in the short, medium term. I think my rating of 0 to 10 would go up significantly if they can the expensive car supplement or put the threshold up to 60,000 for electric vehicles. That would show real, meaningful, tangible actions that recognise the issues that we're facing, and that needs to happen very quickly. Beyond that, we will continue to work with government to move things forward. This is an agenda that we have to share with government.
Lisa, do you want to pick up one of those very briefly?
I mean, all I can do is really echo what's been said before, is I think that you really should ask the question after we've had some output from government, because at the minute we're hopefully waiting to find some positive news. So I'm going to say that, let's say our glass is half full and we're going to hear something, but we need to hear it quickly.
I think for me there is a link between the two questions. You know, the adjacent industry is absolutely vital, but if we look at all of mobility, whether it's transportation, logistics, whether it's my daughter's ordering a pizza on a Friday night and having it delivered by a motorbike, you know, all of these industries can move to electric mobility, and we need a policy that supports the whole framework with the right flexibility for the different brands and businesses in any part of the industry to be confident and to invest for the longer term to help build that demand to move to electrification.
Absolutely, and I commend to you the report that was released this morning talking about all of the wider industry and all the benefits that may come from sort of repair chains, warranty repair chains, you know, charging infrastructure, supply chain, skills, aftercare. There's an entire sort of industry benefit that is much wider than just manufacturers themselves. We've reached the end of time. Sorry we can't take any more questions from that point of view. We're now going into a refreshment break. I've been asked to let you know if you can be back here at 11:50. Please do come and find the panellists if they're happy to sort of stick around for a little bit. Please engage with the exhibitors downstairs. Scan the QR code on your badges, which will take you to the digital programme and the copy of the report. And it remains for me to say thank you to the panel very much. Please join me in doing so.